Hey guys, I'm back, and look what I got. I truly cannot think of a better way to spend $16. So, The Bad Guys 2 and a whole bunch of bonus features for it are now available on digital. This is, of course, wonderful news for me, since now I can give the movie and all its best attributes the big, quality, well-written, beautiful, in-depth okay. For this discussion, we're actually going to be talking about the first and second movie, because said discussion is about a character, and more specifically, how they compare to their book counterparts. I can't honestly say I became one until after the first movie came out, but I'm just as much of a fan of the original source material for The Bad Guys as I am of the adaptations. It was a fun experience seeing where it all started, and if you want the easy version of my thoughts, while they aren't without flaws that still make me prefer the films, for the most part they won me over independent of how vastly different they are from one another. Creative liberties certainly were taken when transitioning this world from page to screen, and the change that I've been the most fascinated by is something that I don't think I would have given any thought had it not been for the dichotomy found within the two mediums. I'm talking about this film's interpretation on Miss Tarantula and examining her alongside
Who the heck are you?
And trust me, the way these two can be compared and contrasted with each other go way beyond the obvious. I've been wanting to talk about the Bad Guys books for a while now, something I haven't seen done in detail a whole lot on YouTube, and figured that this would be a great place to start. Reading them gave me a lot more appreciation for the movie when it came to understanding why the end result is the way it is, and Miss Tarantula, who I enjoyed fine enough with my first exposure to her, was a character I only thought was worth analyzing on an individual level in that context. What are the two versions of this character like, and do they have more in common that meets the eye? I should also mention that while there are elements taken from a lot of the books across both movies, most of the conversation is going to be on what happens in episodes 1 through 5, since that in my mind most accurately reflects their current position in the movies overall. This is A Tale of Two Tarantulas. Released in the US in 2015, The Bad Guys book series is a collection of graphic novels written by Australian children's author and former actor Aaron Blabey, citing his inspiration for the concept being wanting to get his two sons into reading by making something that centered around their interests, said in an interview conducted around when the first movie came out. So at the time, he was into scary animals and cool cars, and I had been thinking about doing something about prejudice and about characters being judged because of the way they looked, and those two things kind of clicked together in my head. But then I was thinking about what did I love when I was his age, and then I thought, you know what do I love now? And I started to think about things that aren't for kids, like Tarantino movies and heist movies. And I thought, I wonder if there's a way to take this iconography and hotwire it in effect for kids. And all that thought process happened in like a 24-hour period. And then by the end of it, The Bad Guys existed. Upon its release in the US, the series became an instant hit, eventually making it onto the New York Times list in 2018 and reaching number 1 on that list the following year. Like the movie adaptation that succeeded it, the story follows a group of anthropomorphic animals who, after years of being ostracized by society because they're deemed the scary animals, they're gonna change their ways and go good. Episode 1 opens in a very similar way to the film, with Mr. Wolf directly interacting with the audience and venting about how he's misunderstood by the world because of the big bad wolf stereotyping, before introducing the other bad guys one by one, each of the things we learn about them juxtaposing this idea even more than the last, and it's hilarious. Unlike the film though, where we're relayed this information with a bank robbery and car chase being used as a backdrop here, it just kind of happens. It's very casual by comparison. Following this introduction and Wolf telling the rest of the crew about his plan, with reluctance they go on 2 missions: saving a cat from a tree, again like they do in the film, and a prison break, both of which go horribly yet hilariously wrong in more ways than one. But enough does go right to end on an optimistic note, with Wolf having a glass half full attitude about the situation, insisting that it still feels good to do the right thing even if not everything went right, and that's the best mindset to have moving forward. And they ride off in the sunset looking for more adventure. The end. Oh, to be continued. The series is formatted where one book always leads into the next, with some kind of tease at the end of the final chapter, so we get a little sneak peek at what's to come in episode 2. So what are the major differences differences between the book and the movie. Mr. Wolf is, in my opinion, the best place to begin when thinking about that question on a macro level. Even though all the bad guys go on this journey of improving themselves, it's Wolf's development and progression that defines the narrative in both iterations, making it a good representation of what the goals of them are. The simplicity when it comes to what drives him to create a new start for himself and his friends stems from the fact that he has a lot more agency towards his goals instead of this being a lesson that he learns over time. That means all the barriers towards reaching that goal in the books are external. Society is still hostile to them, but that doesn't create any internal conflict or self-doubt once he's become fixated on altering the public's perception of them. He's established to be fully realized in that regard in a way that he isn't in the film, where learning to let go of the ideas about himself he's internalized based on the way he's treated by the world around him is the ultimate focus of the story. It's why I think the decision to have them live alongside humans was a good choice, because this ostracization is taken seriously and makes more sense within this setup. And yes, all the characters in the books are animals, there are no humans, Commissioner Luggins is completely unique to the movies, and Tiffany Fluffit is a cat.
You're a cat. It's not the end of the world.
Even in the case of doubt being raised with the other bad guys on if this is a good idea, emphasis on what's learned is always placed on the idea that we need to trust that Wolf has our best interest in mind with his optimism even when things go wrong. A tension that doesn't need to be resolved in the film until after Wolf does come to terms with the fact that
maybe I don't want to be a bad guy? Don't want to be a bad guy anymore, huh? Say it, Wolf.
And this isn't to say that the books are worse because of that, they just have different things they want to accomplish. One is trying to make a thematic statement, and the other, though having an ongoing narrative, is more focused on how the increasing absurdity of their circumstances allow them to become more capable as a group of heroes. Looking at episode 1, you'll notice another big difference relating to the bad guys themselves. There's an Easter egg in the opening sequence of the film where you can see profiles for them that include their criminal records taken verbatim from the book. Not really something you pay much mind to, since we're already witnessing them in action to establish what we should know about them, but it's still a nice detail. Except no criminal record is shown for Webbs, just a close-up of their wanted pictures with their criminal activity not being visible because there isn't anything to reference. Tarantula does not make an appearance in episode 1. The lineup at the start of the series only consists of Wolf, Piranha, Snake, and my spirit animal. So how do they become a part of the team? Enter episode 2, Mission Unpluckable, also released in 2015. A new framing device is introduced here, Tiffany Fluffit Cat recapping the events of the previous book in the form of a news broadcast. For her first time using it, she interviews eyewitnesses from the bad guys' attempts to set some dogs in prison free, laying the foundation for a new source of tension that'll eventually develop between the group. Snake vocally expresses how the way their heroic efforts were interpreted is a sign that Wolf's plan is a lost cause, but he changes his tune real quick once he realizes what their next self-assigned mission is going to be: breaking 10,000 chickens outside of Sunnyside Chicken Farm. Wolfie then proceeds to point out it's a maximum security facility and they're going to need help breaking into it. I think you can tell what's coming next. Meet Tarantula, also known as Legs, a friend of Wolf's and Master Tech Wiz who's going to help them deactivate all the booby traps, except the other bad guys aren't as receptive of him, especially not Mr. Shark, who has very apparent arachnophobia and freaks out when he first shows up. Legs doesn't seem bothered by this, but Wolfie apologizes to him anyways and reassures the other bad guys they have a lot more in common than they realize and shouldn't be so quick to judge for superficial things like not wearing clothes when the rest of them do. Once they establish a bit of credibility when they hack into Snake's police file and temporarily alter his records, we find out what the actual plan for breaking in is. Someone lowers the others into the facility through the roof to plug in a USB to shut off the alarms, then they climb back up, dodge the lasers guarding the entrance to the chicken cages to turn them off manually on the other side, and then rescue the poultry from captivity. Snake, Wolf, and Piranha are the ones actually entering the chicken farm, while Sharky stands guard with Legs. Okay. This is my personal favorite book in the series. And even though I have yet to read all of them, I still doubt that opinion is going to change once I inevitably do. Most likely because I'm sure this is the only one where Piranha does not make a single joke about butts. Editor's note, I just found out that's not true, disregard my previous comment. But jokes aside, the reason why I feel that way about this entry revolves around how the introduction of Legs as a member of the crew and as their own character advance multiple attributes of the ongoing story. Let's circle back to what the main narrative narrative goal of the series is: the bad guys becoming more capable as a group. Mission Unpluckable isn't just repetition of the same objectives from what came before, but in a different location. It's the characters having to adapt to one that's a bit more challenging. And that doesn't just come in the form of developing confidence that they can pull something off like this after all that went wrong the first time around. It also means recognizing their limitations, hence why adding a new member of the team feels right at this point. Leg seems to share Wolf's idealism about his goals, having a bit more enthusiasm compared to the other members of the group. But then there's the mission and the role they play in it. Sharky's arachnophobia proves to be a big problem once they get started. The bad guys can't touch the vent walls without making too much noise, so he has to be extra careful when lowering them in. Except he gets too nervous every time they hop onto his head, something that happens during this part of the mission. Luckily, things don't go too sideways directly because of this, other than Piranha having to hide inside of a sandwich to get the flash drive needing to be rescued. Now there's two objectives, and Sharky is not any less scared than he was before. Legs eventually gets fed up with it and just straight up asks him what his deal is. When he tells him he's afraid of spiders, he proceeds to ask why, and as you hear him talk about things like their eyes and legs being the things that creep him out, you think to yourself how Legs is being way nicer about all this than he or any of the other bad guys deserve. He's trying to help them out, and all anyone other than Wolf can do is focus on things that are either outside of his control or straight up don't matter. Even when he puts on clothes to try and make Piranha and Snake more comfortable, Piranha's like, oh, but he's still not wearing pants, so I'm still grossed out. It should be noted that Shark has a relative lack of hostility when it comes to his discomfort, and apologizes when he realizes how he may have come across. Much irony is present in the character established to be the most intimidating, described as someone who will eat literally anything, being the most squeamish about Legs. But they point out how that should be something to consider when it comes to getting over his fear of spiders. They can't control how they look the same way Sharky can't control the way he looks. And once he realizes he doesn't have anything to be afraid of, they devise a new plan based around what he's best at, per Legs' suggestion, disguising himself as a giant chicken and also leading them to their freedom. That improvisation is what makes the mission end successfully, and puts everyone on good terms with Legs afterwards when he gives their primary mode of transportation some much needed upgrades. And they ride off into the sunset, oh look, it's a guinea pig. Tarantula isn't the only character from the first movie absent from the first book. The tease here is our introduction to Professor Marmalade, who will remain the main antagonist for the next few. What I said about Legs' introduction in the context of the larger ongoing story doesn't just apply to them. Teasing Marmalade in the end is also an effective way of gradually building up the stakes and moving past the status quo, but this video is not about him, so I didn't want to spend too much time on it. I'm also not going to go into as much detail about the other books. Legs continues to prove himself as a valuable asset to the team, both with their skills and their personality, but not much focus is given to him for a while. But after all that I've said about this, I'm sure the first thought that comes to mind is, well, that sure is different from the movie. So, where do I even start when talking about these two together? I guess we can get the most obvious and, quite frankly, least interesting change from the books to the movies out of the way now.
I'm a go!
Oh, yeah, I knew that.
Okay, and when I say uninteresting discussion, I feel that way because it's always uninteresting. At least if that's where the analysis starts and ends. And I'll elaborate more on what I mean by that later. What I should probably say, though, is the first thought that came to mind prior to this movie being released, and I doubt I'm the only one who thought this.
Hi, I'm Aquafina, and I voice Miss Tarantula in The Bad Guys.
Alright, I'm gonna say something that might be controversial. I do not think Aquafina is as terrible of an actress as people make her out to be. And this isn't a full-on defense, there's plenty of valid reason to criticize her, and she has given her fair share of terrible performances. But if we take a look at her filmography as she rose to A-list celebrity status throughout the late 2010s, in isolation, most of her roles have just been unsubstantial. Nobody likes Scuttle in The Little Mermaid 2023, I get it, but I can't really say that her in Kung Fu Panda 4, Migration, or even something like Raya and the Last Dragon is all on that level. The overexposure is the reason I think the majority of people dislike her as an actress. She doesn't have enough skill as a voice actress specifically to justify how frequently she's cast in mainstream animated films. Is her performance as Miss Tarantula an exception to the rule? That's where we get into who this version of the character is. Tarantula, now nicknamed Webs instead of Legs, is still the tech whiz of the group with a similar easygoing personality. There's an excerpt from J.P. Sands in one of the art books where he talks about what they were going for with them in early developments, which reads as follows. With Tarantula, we knew early on that she's the teenager of the family. She's the one who kind of knows everything. She doesn't need to be told anything. She'll be there. She'll follow Wolf like a dad or Snake like a mom. And I do think Awkwafina is a good fit for that, encapsulating the smug, nonchalant attitude she's meant to have with how naturally the cartoonishly difficult hacking in this universe comes to her. Personally, I find this approach resulting in her having the more endearing personality between the two. She also has these mini crash outs she'll do whenever she gets frustrated, which I think allows the performance to not feel one note.
Are you kidding me? Yes!
As I said earlier, there isn't much to analyze about this iteration of her by herself. She isn't bad or even my least favorite member of the crew, but I have more things to say about Piranha, even if not all of it is positive. Adaptational changes don't ever come from nothing though, and once I discovered how different they seemed to be from where they started, I wanted to try and piece together how they ended up being what they were. Removing her origin story in movie 1 and having them be on the team at the start before they make the decision to go good is the change that made the most sense to me. How Tarantula became a member of the bad guys isn't just that. It also functions as character development and a necessary change to the team dynamic. None of these things are present in the movie since becoming heroes isn't their arc. Being introspective and changing their self-perception is, an arc that's only presented with any kind of complexity with Mr. Snake in the books, with things going wrong impacting his trust in Wolf as the team leader and as his best friend in a way that's unique to him. Now, on the one hand, taking the bad guys' treatment by society, how that influences their worldview, and making that a large part of the emotional core and its message, you can't really get away with a plotline like that the same way the books, which have a much more hyperbolic way of presenting this relationship and doing so usually in short bursts, are able to. It just reads differently given the tones and thematic intents. But on the other hand, that's where a strength the books have over the movies start to show itself. And Sharky learning to get over his fear of spiders show how more time was dedicated to emphasizing how learning to become heroes and the best version of themselves look different for each character, even if it's a lot simpler and more straightforward. Not just how they change, but how their interactions and relationships with each other do as well. But because in the adaptation it's a question of if they should try and change rather than when and how, they opt to spend more time establishing their competence as villains and why leaving behind a life of crime wouldn't be as easy of a decision for them. You don't get as many of those small moments between them that distinguish their arcs from each other, as entertaining as they still manage to be. Some are still there, most of the things involving Wolf and Snake's relationship are kept intact, but nothing really for Tarantula. Now, because the conflicts they overcome in the second movie are primarily external, navigating life as ex-cons and stopping the girls, it's much less of a problem, and I find the choices they make for Tarantula's character here to also be very interesting. I described the flashback sequence in the beginning of The Bad Guys 2 as paying homage to Tarantula's original backstory, which it is. We find out they're still the last member to join the main roster in this continuity. Kind of. How they meet is never explained, it's just their first heist with her on the team. Yet by occupying a new context, the question that's raised and answered is, what would it look like if she joined them while they were still criminals? And this made me give more thought to a subtler similarity she has with her alternate self, the initial struggle to fit in. Except, instead of that being a byproduct of the other character's fear, it's with them not being used to the bad guys' methods, and in general being more practical than them. And it's through moving past that in the heat of the moment that she's able to ultimately be the one to save the day on her first mission and fully win the others over, just like Legs. Good fan service that doubles as a foundation for the central ideas the film presents. Not to mention the recontextualization of other elements of her character, like coming up with the nickname Webs. That sounds like something a teenager would do to try and be cool. Across both these movies, decisions like this stick out far more in my mind than just her gender. I bring all this up because it's a mindset that's applicable to any time aspects of a pre-existing character's identity are changed across adaptations. Hence why it's exhausting to see how frequently it's met with bigoted backlash, usually when the character comes from a more mainstream IP. Even in instances of the character in question being worsely written or acted or whatever, it distracts from any real analysis when conversations get flattened to, all the things that are worse about this character are because the writers were too preoccupied with filling a non-existent quota. For Tarantula specifically, we all know that DreamWorks likes getting big A-list talent for their movies, so it wouldn't surprise me if the only reason they made that change was to find a way to get Awkwafina in there. If that is the case though, you wouldn't be able to tell because of, again, how she fits the role. But that's pretty much the extent to which it's relevant. It's an innocuous detail. There's not really a narrative reason behind it because there doesn't need to be. Having Tarantula be this teenage androgynous femme here instead of an old guy is neither a good nor bad choice, it's just a choice. One that's mutually exclusive from the quality of everything else involving them. These two versions of the character have strengths and weaknesses that are worth discussing, and in an ideal media ecosystem, that should be the standard without needing to worry about contributing to manufactured outrage. I should clarify that everything I said in that last section doesn't mean that I view this as some mystery that needs solving, why certain people get selectively mad whenever this happens in media online. Because it isn't particularly difficult to figure out the answer to that, from the clout that can come with the original source material being more mainstream and popular, to them simply feeling less threatened by concepts like talking animals being depicted on screen than characters that represent the identities and experiences of real people that they don't like. Like, if someone were to make a video about how changing Tarantula's gender is a part of some secret feminist psyop on the part of the filmmakers, I would genuinely be shocked if anyone were to take that seriously. And that is the point that I'm trying to get at here. Making this video was a way of expressing my opinions on this phenomenon in a way that I've previously attempted to do in the past. And even though I could just say don't harass women of color who are cast as live-action Disney princesses even when you don't like their portrayals of the character, this way gave me a chance to talk about a character that I was genuinely fascinated by, and it was a lot of fun. Sometimes the best way to talk about any real-world topic is by using a piece of media that you're passionate about as a frame of reference for doing so. So yeah, not bad in terms of analysis for my 7th favorite character in the... Look, every single major character besides Piranha is an overwhelming net positive, so don't treat that like an insult.